And we are here. It is Sifu and Sage time, everyone. Hello. Welcome back. We have our Sifu with us, and I'm a sage. I'm just trying to draw some of this information out of my Sifu. It's hard sometimes to get this information out. He wants me to ask all these questions, right? And sometimes I don't know the questions to ask, but anyway, I digress. Last week, we began with an incredible journey into the lives of Shun and Po. These are two extraordinary dignitaries who bridge the cultures of China and Japan, and our lovely Sifu now has shared some of his info with us and how he traveled the world with them, and it wasn't just a social or political journey, honestly, but he went deep within them as an apprentice in these internal arts. And so today we're going to just peel back a tiny bit, if we can, on the curtain on these long held traditions. And we're going to understand maybe a little of the why. Because I want to go, there's like these dudes live to be pretty old. I'm more concerned about their health and wellness, where Sifu might want some other info, but uh, I want to know their routines. And he lived with them. So, Sifu, when we look at these figures like Shun and Po and their physical vitality and their wisdom was legendary. So, in your travels with them, what did you observe about their daily habits as a
So
start?
yeah, okay. So I mean, well, Shun and Po themselves. So when so they both, as far as I know, which is a little bit of a sounds strange, but as far as I know, they died both at 106. Shun and Po were actually 2 years difference between them. Shun was born in literally 1900, and Po was born 1902. Um, and they, as for a lot of as for a lot of people in China, if they're close to it, there are. So most people only know of like the Shaolin Temple, and they say Shaolin means the wooded area, the wooded temple. So that's what Shaolin means. And so it's the temple by the temple in the woods, in essence. Easy way to translate it, but there's actually many temples in the woods. There is more than one. Like we only see the one now, but there was actually like many temples. Um, and there is one very close to Wudang Mountain, and Wudang Mountain is a very Wu means five, and Dang means mountain, so it's the five mountains, and these five mountains in China are said to be the birthplace of Taoism, and and especially when you're in Wudang and you say where does Taoism come from, they always point up. And what does that mean? And I said, well, higher dimensions, space, and higher dimensions, or something in between. So the Taoist philosophy is all about little and often. Is you practice little and often all the time, and then the Buddhist philosophy, which is very very similar, from the Shaolin temples, because the Shaolin temples were Buddhist monks, um, and Buddhism and Taoism. So Shun and Po had both very hard, what we called hard practice or hard martial arts. So things like Taekwondo, karate, judo. Obviously, these are more Japanese, but very hard style martial arts, which gives you one sort of fitness, very yang, very masculine fitness. And then you have the internal or soft martial arts like Tai Chi, Bakwa, Xingyi, Zhangzhong. And they're a little bit misrepresented by the word soft. It's more hard or more external and internal. Hard martial arts tend to use more muscle power and in more direct attacks. They're a little bit more masculine, a little bit more Japanese style, even the Chinese ones. where internal martial arts use more tendon power and it's more internal, so it's whole body strength rather than just limbs. But both, in essence, have a martial side, a healing side, and a spiritual side. So they very much grew up bouncing between the Shaolin temples and Wudang Mountain. So different temples within Wudang, different styles of Taoism. And the Shun family themselves, the Shun Dao, is said to be round about 20 generations. So I sort of, or at least the main foundations were 20 generations of the Shun family. And they're in the Shun family. They were uh, they were statisticians, they were healers, they were alchemists, they were barefoot doctors, they were dragonal shamans, they were drunken Daoists. They were all the different variations of the Daoist sort of alchemy and other things as well. So the Shun family itself has all these mixtures of different styles, all different shades of the Tao, the way, the path, the balance. And Shun and Po very much practice these, very much like practice these. But one thing I want to sort of like say, so when I met them, Shun, this was like 81, 82, the year 1981, 1982. Well, Shun was 81, but he looked about 50, and Po was slightly younger, and but again they both looked a lot younger. But this is the interesting but. Like when I first met them, obviously I thought, oh, they're exceptional. When I went to China, I suddenly found they're not as exceptional. They were still quite unique, but when I went to China and I was in my 20s, and I was sort of like in the top tier of heat, like the top 10%, 5%, 10% of 20-year-olds, so quite really fit for the time. But I went to China and there was 90-year-olds who, older than my Sifus, putting me to shame. And it's like, what's going on here? And in China, their attitude to health is different. Um, and there was something I just recently remembered again is that they would say in Chinese, and then my teachers, they looked after millionaires and billionaires, um, and the sudden realization, or a lot of these millionaires were saying, I can make money easy, but get my health back, that's harder. And the Shun well, Po would say it more often, is health is wealth, is that your health is far more important than any money, any influence, any power, because it is, and it's like I said it itself, like within about when we talk about Jing, is that it is ancestral energy, ancestral, and you have so much that your lifespan will go through, and then it will burn out. So in essence, like when we talk about people, oh, they live the average of 60 to 80 years. Well, that's if they don't do anything with it, if they squander that energy, squander that essence. Well, if you practice and if you cultivate, because the big thing in Taoism is cultivation, if you cultivate your energy, well, look on an average, you could live like my Sifus, like to 100, 106. But there are stories within Taoism that actually there were people who are living far more than that. And at one stage, or at least in the age of the Yellow Emperor, which it depends who you talk to. Some say that it was 4,000 years ago. Some say it was 10,000 years ago. The Yellow Emperor existed, and the Yellow Emperor talked about his ancestors and the people he learned from, whose average age was 250 years. And so you see, hear these stories, and definitely, like I say, well, when I looked at my teachers who were in their 80s and they looked in their 50s, um, and this whole idea of using qigong, energy exercise, breath work, and different variations of that to cultivate your energy, to cultivate vitality, and then when you start looking at what we now call epigenetics, and you start understanding epigenetics and NLP, which is in essence the way you think and feel affects your physical health. You're starting to see these patterns. You start to realize that what we've been told and what is true isn't necessarily the same thing. But for like I said, when I was in my 20s, so that was the 90s, and you know, I had been brought up with this myth of of oh, you get to a certain age and get aches and pains, and that's just normal. That's old age. These 90-year-olds were blowing that out of the water, and and he's like, oh, oh, like you guys are amazing, and they go, we're just we're average. We're not, we're average for China at that time. They were the average. They were the normal, because they were brought up with the understanding of doing so much exercise every single day. And in actual fact, within China, so it's sort of a law. It's sort of like I don't know so much about America, but in the UK, we are advised to do half an hour exercise every single day. In China, it's law. It's a sort of mild law, but it is law that you have to do half an hour exercise every day. And this is why, like China back in the 70s, they actually had gyms in the parks, and they have huge parks and huge bandstands, and you don't have to do Tai Chi, and you don't have to do Qigong. You can do dance, you can run, you can do exercises, but a lot of them do the traditional Tai Chi or Qi Gong, and they, because of this regular exercise, but also because of the attitude, the way they see things in a different way, they keep themselves healthy, they keep themselves vital. But one of the things for me, it's not just about the physical health and the mental health, but it's also about the sacred child. Is like anybody who knows me, is that I never take that much too seriously, or I will always at some point go into being playful and silly, because the sacred child for me is a very important aspect. Well, I was brought up with the aspect of the Trinity. So the divine feminine, the divine masculine, and the divine child, the sacred child. That they're as important as each other. All three keep the energy flowing, which is why my symbol, in what the Shun logo, you actually see three little spirals, a little bit like the Tai Chi symbol, but actually three of them all intertwined. And they're red, green, and purple, which are indications of the body, the mind, and the spirit, or the Qi, the Jing, and the Shen. And it's about balance. It's all about this balance and this understanding, but also this thing of that you are far, not only is health wealth, but also as important is you are far more than you. That and now the science do even proving that your consciousness is not inside your body. It was like the MRI scans. I remember, there was Qigong that we was doing case studies on Qigong back in the 90s. And one of the case studies they're doing, they wanted to, or we got ended up part of, they wanted to find out where consciousness was. And what was surprising the people doing the case studies was when they were doing the MRI scans, the thoughts weren't coming from inside the body, they were coming outside into the brain. And so they were starting to say, well, that sort of indicates that consciousness is not inside here. Or if you want to use the word soul, your soul is not somewhere in here. It's actually outside coming in. So that leads into the Taoist concept of expand your consciousness, expand your energy, like the Tao is shapeless, formless, and it is constantly expanding. So the more you learn, the more you grow, the more you flow. The more you lean back and see the bigger picture, the more you'll see.
And I love that you just kind of led into exactly what I wanted to talk about, because we're um, we are this conscious being having a experience, and we're not really sure what it is. But I loved when you taught me this. I took this one away so seriously, and like you said about the sacred child, I tell this to everyone, and it's so true. Act like a child, but take responsibility like an adult. Now, my Sifu Boggy is the one that taught me that. I take that into my daily life as an attitude every single moment because it's so true. And because everything should be lighthearted as a child. And you brought up such a great point that when we do act like a child in our life, the world in our conscious world is way more receptive to us than when we're taking responsibility like an adult, right? I don't think we're as receptive to that energy. Your thoughts?
The sacred child is, that concept is such a powerful thing. But like one thing I want to say is like, it's a little bit like you get an old dog or an old cat, an old animal, and you put it around puppies or you put it around the babies. You watch that at first, it feels a bit disgruntled of these, but it starts to play with them and it starts to interact. And that puppy or dog or the dog or cat, it starts getting young again. It starts going back to its childhood. And the the whole thing with that energy is that when you start playing, you start adopting that energy. There's very much known in Shaolin Kung Fu, is that is the imitation. They'll imitate certain things. So there'll be certain styles that imitate a tiger, or imitate this, or drunken
Mm-hmm.
style. One of my favorite, not only Kung Fu, but also Qi Gongs as well, is drunken Qi Gong, because it imitates the idea of being drunk. And the whole idea of being drunk is that you're actually all constantly moving and you're constantly finding your center. And we know, like, when people get drunk, they're less likely to hurt themselves because they fall over a lot, but they're less likely to hurt themselves because they're more relaxed. And also, depending what they're drinking, is like they get very philosophical and see things in a different way. So the imitation of something allow NLP, the neuro-linguistic programming and the epigenetics, where you focus on grows, you focus on that energy, you become that energy. So becoming childlike and playing, but then seeing the gratitude side of the sacred child is that everything in awe. You see the wonder of everything, and rather than ignoring it and so, well, there's an interesting thing within even the Bible. Is a friend, or one of my things I had to do in my younger years was I had to study religions, because when you're doing close protection, different countries, their faiths have a far, far stronger impact on their society. So understanding their religion, you understand the different mentality. And I had a tutor for that who was a rabbi, but he studied all the religions of the world, and Ezekiel, and he actually taught me the Gnostics and taught me different information. And one of the translations that he said was incorrect is that in the Bible we've translated it as, when a child you act like a child, but when you become an adult you put away childish things. Is that his translation of that was more what I say is that becoming an adult, you still play like a child, but you take responsibility like an adult. So you don't blame other people for your actions. Like you have play and you have fun, and when you do something, it's down to you. It's your. Whereas a child, we like I didn't do that, and we blame somebody else. The not positive childlike side. So it was an interesting thing of I heard a different translation of that original message, and that's the one I use and like flow with is that you should be like a child. You should allow yourself to play. You should be part of that divine feminine energy. You should be part of that divine masculine energy, but you should also be part of that divine child energy. And but being an adult, you take responsibility. You play, you do whatever, but don't pass the buck. And there's lots of people who claim to be adults like to definitely pass the buck and not take responsibility. And I'm not just talking about maybe accidents, but take responsibility for your own health. Take responsibility for your own learning and understanding. And other, I think, well, very much in the UK, there's a thing of, oh, you get to a certain point, you no longer need to learn. Like you're no longer at school. And it's like, well, society, our reality we live in. If you don't learn, you don't grow, and if you don't grow, you won't be flowing. And it is that the more you learn, the more you know. The more you know, the more you flow. So it's this idea, but also learning again from the childlike side is always being an empty cup. Always asking the whys, always growing. Like you gather information, but you don't know it all. You can't know it all. Is that I don't know it all. I know a lot, but I don't know it all. And you're always growing. You're always expanding. You're always leaning back and seeing the bigger picture. So for me, that's like really, really important. And it's this I think the biggest thing for me of the Tao, like one of the translations of the Tao is balance, but it's not the balance of scales. In the West society, we see scales, and the scales they're balanced when they're deadly still, and it's like deadly still is actually an interesting translation of that. Is that because stillness creates dis-ease, creates imbalance. You start to too much stillness, too much tension becomes stagnation. So the Taoist concept of the balance is more like a wave. It's a constantly moving, and the bigger the up, the bigger the down. And the whole idea is that you, in proportion, those waves are in proportion, which is why there are so many different Taos. There isn't just one. There isn't just one way. There isn't there's the best way, but it's the best way for you. You've got to find what that best way is. And what it is now might not be the same in 10 years from now or 100 years from now. Is that it always adapts, it always changes. It's like the seasons, it changes. So for me, balance is important, but it's a balance that is fluid and a balance that allows change and allows you to adapt.
I love that. That is so good. I mean, because that's really what the essence is about Qigong. And it's, I think at the very core, um, it's energy movement and to optimize that. And it's not, balance is great, but you're right. I love that you just, made that mention about the scales, because in the West, we think of that about balance. We just want the road to just be even and balanced, right? But that's not what it's all about. And actually, when you're walking a path, there's a lot of imbalance when you're on that path. And our traditional movements that we do in Qigong really helped us to lubricate those joints so that our fascia then isn't stagnant, like Sifu was talking about, that then leads us to chronic pain. We don't want that tension. We want to balance our nervous system. And so we want to get to that rest and digest every night. And I think that he gave such a great example about Shun and Po, how they acted. like bridges, if you will, in the nations. I mean, and they haven't been, our nations haven't been doing that. We don't haven't really had a lot of dignitaries like that brought exercise. I mean, I know that Bruce Lee did, and but still, we need to ensure that this energy that we're talking about, Sifu, and the grounding that you're describing, everyone hears. So it's such a vital time, I think, for everyone to learn the beauty of qigong, the routines that are so easy, so, and it's breath, body, and spirit, and it's something that really doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, how much do you practice every day, Sifu, really, in all essence? I mean, I do like 15, 20 minutes, maybe a little longer some days.
Well, it's interesting that officially I should be doing 18 hours. I should to learn or to do everything that I know. I should be doing 18 hours a day. What I do is probably a few hours every day, but I do that few hours all over the day. So you know, like that whole idea of like that 15 minutes is, well, I do lots of 15
Right.
minutes. You know, is that you know the whole idea of that concept. You know, when people say to me, "Oh, I haven't got time," it's like I know, I know, without even looking too hard, I can find 15 minutes in your day. I know that if I look a little bit deeper, I can probably find half an hour. And if I really look, I could probably find an hour because quite simply, how many times do you stand there waiting for a kettle? How many times do you sit there watching mind-numbing TV? How many times do you pondering rather than actually doing, or trying
All I'm
rather than
all I'm
doing?
hearing right
Well,
now is there's a qigong for that. There's a qigong for that. There's a qigong. That's what he says. Like when you're washing dishes, right? You just and he's the one that taught me that. You just turn that qigong into washing dishes. Now when I wait for the kettle, I'm picking cherries, right? While I'm waiting for the kettle to boil. So yeah, I love that.
well,
It's so
one of
true.
the biggest. Well, I mean, there was two versions, like two versions. Obviously, the Daoism, that's a thing, you know, like telling everything. Your goal, you know, your goal either with, you know, you use the terminology of Tai Chi or Qigong, but your goal is to first learn it, and then your goal is to turn everything into it. But one thing I saw that like just showed me that it's not just a Taoist thing is that the Shaolin monks, like when they sweep the floor, they're doing it in a way that's fluid. They're doing it and they're breathing in, breathing out. And when I actually spoke to them, they were saying they were actually doing a meditation. They were clearing their head, and it's the well, okay, I get that, but what do you mean by that? And it's like as every sweep of the broom, they were sweeping out stress and worry from the head. They were clearing their mind, and I've heard that within Taoism. It's like it's like washing a dish. Every time I clean a dish, I'm cleaning a little bit of my stress of the day, or clearing my mind a little bit more, and so everything becomes a meditation. A meditation means focus on one thing, forget everything else. Everything becomes qigong, an energized exercise, a breath work. Everything becomes a neigong, a stretching exercise. Because when, like we sort of mentioned cats and dogs, when you watch a cat or dog, or especially cats and dogs, but you watch them when they wake up in the morning, you see them stretch. They do their yoga. At some point in the day, however old they are, you see them staring into space. They're doing their meditation. At some point in the day, however old they are, they're suddenly running around like freaking lunatics. That's their qigong energy exercise. They're suddenly building up their energy. So in nature, nature already shows that this exists. And my Sifus were very much Qigong, Neigong, Shengong. So Shengong is meditation. Neigong is stretching or yoga or Taoist stretching. And Qigong is energy exercise. Every single day you do all three. And if you only have 15 minutes, you do 5 minutes of each. Or you do one exercise that has all three. but the whole idea, and eventually everything you do is a meditation. Everything you do is a stretch, an Gong. Everything you do is a Qi Gong. And you integrate, the goal is that everything becomes the play. Everything becomes, becomes this flowing and moving. And when you get to that stage where you can turn everything into a Qigong, then you're not you start cultivating more energy. You start, getting younger. You start vitalizing. And I always, like, one of the things I've said so many times, you're never too old, you're never too young. The youngest the youngest child I ever started doing qigong for was about 2, and started just teaching things and pick it up. And in China, they start off around about, say, 2, 3, 4 years old. The oldest student I ever had was 96, and they started learning at 96, and they lasted another 10 years. They died at 106. And when at 106, they could hardly walk, and they were giving up because their wife had died about, was that year? Was it a year or two before? And their daughter, who did Qigong with me, said, "Can you help my dad?" And it's like, well, we'll start off with basic stuff. We started off in seated Qigong, and we went from there. And we kept adding more and kept making it fun. And like I said, he died at 106, 10 years later. So Qigong is for anybody and everybody. There's a classic saying that says Qigong is for everyone, but not everyone thinks they're for Qigong. And
Oh,
it's all about your choice. It's all about what you think you choose, because what you believe is true for you.
isn't that the case? I know. And I I wish everyone would learn about this practice and feel like I do. I want that because I know how valuable it is, but I can't make others. I wanted to in the beginning, like push it all, but you can't. People have to come to it in their own volition, and they have to feel it themselves internally to know that there's this purpose that the things you were just talking about bring us in our own life, and acknowledge that it opens us up more, and we could maybe be more guarded. And now there's actually a practice that can open things up. I mean, today in my own class, I taught the Yi Jing Jing, which is a Shaolin exercise, and it's more just dynamic tension. And I teach some students that can't get up at all, nursing home type students, and this one is so good because you breathe in, you hold that dynamic tension, and then release it, something similar to that. And that dynamic tension can be done anywhere, in a chair, laying in bed, to create this. And what I learned about it is, and I taught my students this today, is that when Bodhidharma traveled to India, he went there and he saw all these Buddhists, or all these monks that were there practicing. They were all just had no energy, and they just all sat there all day just meditating, and they're all just flabby and didn't have any blah, right? And so he went actually then in a cave himself, meditated about this for, I guess, 8 or 9 years, came up with this Yi Jing Jing, taught it to all these Indian Buddhas, and then they all became strong. So I mean, I'm really hyperbolating there. There's a lot going on, but go look it up. It's pretty cool. And then they ended up calling him Damo, I believe, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's a cool story. And I don't know, but it's the spring. I think spring's a good time to do that. The Yi Jing Jing.
Well, the biggest thing with like breath work qigong. So a very simple one, or it's this whole idea, or like the wave, where the wave, or yang and yin, Yin is contracting. Yin is can be fit. Yin's a whole list of different things, but one of the things yin is it contracts, and one of the things yang is it expands. So in qigong, we have what's called the belly breathing technique, and so you breathe in, you let the belly expand, you breathe out, you pull the belly in. That's the first level. But eventually, you actually want to do that with the whole body. You watch a baby, you watch like a young like animals. They breathe in, the whole body expands, and you breathe out, the whole body contracts. And it's not contracting as such, but it's going to the reset, going to the zero. So you breathe in and you expand, uh, and breathe out and you reset. Breathe and expand. So and the whole thing of where's good old happy Buddha. Um, one of my Buddhas was, but well, this one, but I don't know where the other one's gone. But with the Chinese Buddha is the happy Buddha is that they breathing in, the whole body expands, and then you breathe out. Oh, that's the one I was looking. Breathe in, the belly expands, but the whole body expands. You breathe out, you go back. Now within that thing of contraction is that within the Daoist circles, or what you have to be careful of is not creating too much tension or tension in the wrong place. Because when people sometimes learn that move, they go and they end up exploding. So, and or what we in the West are known for is holding that tension in, and especially in our shoulders, and especially doing massage, you are massaging people. Lots of people have like almost like concrete tension in neck and shoulders, where the shoulders in Eastern philosophy represents the world, a bit like in the Greek, the Atlas holding the world on his shoulders. All your tension goes in your shoulders. Now, if you tension, as you can see, my face suddenly blowing up red. You hold that tension in your neck, you're literally strangling yourself. So you're cutting off. So the biggest thing within this thing of tension is that dynamic tension you hold in the body, but not anywhere around here. Because when you hold it around here, blood goes up and it can't come back down. Now, when people get headaches and migraines, it's because the tension in the neck and shoulders, the blood circulating up, and the brain starts to swell, but because of the tension, it's not going down as easily or not at all. And literally, the brain swells, and as it swells, the migraine is literally your brain crushing against the skull. So you have to be careful with this dynamic tension, because if you're holding it in your neck and shoulders, you're literally going to make your brain swell, or you could cause issues. So the whole point is to, when you're holding this tension, it's around here, but never around here. So the whole idea. So breathing in, and then you want to hold that tension. So I'm pulling the belly, and I've really contract that belly and holding that belly in, or I push it into the hands. But what you want to do, so this goes into iron palm, what's called iron shirt, or the iron techniques, is that you individualize that tension. So I just put the tension into my fingertips. So the tension is just in the fingertips, and everything else I want to loosen and relax, but it's just in the fingertips. So they're really cool. Well, cool for me, not so much when I do it to you, but really cool technique I do is when I do this and I push into somebody's chest, and then it feels like you're going through my chest, and they try to remove the hand, but the hand is all loose. It's just the tension just in there, and so it's about putting the tension into certain places. So we create this tension, and then we release it and let it go. So hold, keep it loose, so move ahead and keep loose here, but the tension's all in the body, and then totally release it. And as you totally release it, you're allowing the toxins to clear out the body. And what normally happens as well, your head might suddenly get lightheaded, or in Qi Gong, even like if you sit up, sometimes you get lightheaded. Oxygen is rushing up into your brain. So you suddenly get a flood of oxygen through the blood into the brain. The brain itself is electric, and that rush of oxygen lights up the brain like lighting up a city, and that's why you get lightheaded. So what the Taoists will say is increasing chi, get more chi in the head. But if you have tension here, that's not going to go anywhere. It's going to get trapped in your head, which then causes problems. So the more you can relax the shoulders and neck, the more it can go up, and then it comes back down. It goes up, and then it comes back down. And the whole idea is to call what we know as the microcosmic orbit or scoop, the loop,
Mhm.
that the mighty barefoot doctor would say, comes all the way up to the top of the head. And this is why we put the tongue on the roof of the mouth, because you allow that to drain through the top of the mouth, through the tongue, goes down the front of the body, all the way back down, and it creates this loop. It's well, one of the loops. There's a couple, but it creates the first one, so it goes up the spine all the way up to the top, and then circulates all the way down. And within Shun, we actually show this within a simple exercise where we call it also circulating hands, but it's also used as a metaphor for that breathing technique. So my hands rise up, and it's like the energy circling up the back of the spine, comes up to the top of the head. And then as I breathe out, the hands go back down. And so it's going down the front of the body. So we can actually use the hands to use our imagination to help circulate this energy. So for those who are not very visual, you have a physical representation. And so when we move in Qigong, we're physically representing different bits of where the energy is going, or different parts of what's happening with that energy.
Well, and I think that's a great place to stop because you're talking about the folding of this energy, and I think that's a good topic for us for next week because that it's so um, dynamic that way that energy around us, like he said in the very beginning of his talk, that energy is actually all around us, and we are actually a part of it in this microcosmic orbit, right? We're a conduit between heaven and earth, and energy's all around us. And I believe it's 6 feet down below us. I call it a big bubble of white light. But we're going to talk about that, I think, next week, and maybe go into more of those mysterious things about energy, and get Sifu to maybe open up a little bit more about his stories. I mean, I loved some of the stories he told us already today, about how, he was guided by Shun and Po, but then he took it and ran with it, and now he's out. He's been teaching. I know, and maybe we'll get in on this a little bit, but he's taught. He's very humble. He doesn't say a lot about what he's done, and I know he's taught a lot of big dignitaries in the past, and he worked in London and with a lot of the military or a lot of the police I know in London, which I can't imagine can be just in London. There you go. Anyway, so we'll next week go into more of what I think you guys want to hear about these guarded traditions and the energy, because it's all about that. I think it's all about energy and vibration, and Sifu has the secrets. So I'm going to try to get it out of him. Thank you, Sifu.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Bye for now.